I thought I could swallow my parents' favoritism until they announced a Hawaii reward for every grandkid, except my son, in one group text. They erased him like he didn't count. So I started digging. Emails, receipts, whispers about a perfect family video. Then I found the education fund my grandmother left for all the kids had been reimbursed for something that looked a lot like paradise. The vibration of my phone against the hard laminate of my desk was the first crack in the dam. It was a Tuesday afternoon, specifically 2 o'clock, the kind of hour that feels heavy and gray in a fluorescent-lit office. I was deep in a spreadsheet, trying to balance the accounts for a local logistics firm that paid me just enough to keep a roof over our heads and food in the refrigerator. My son, Leo, was at school, safe, likely sitting in circle time and learning about shapes or seasons. I was at peace, or at least the version of peace you achieve when you are 33, a single mother, and too busy to realize how tired you actually are. Then the phone buzzed, and buzzed again, and again. I looked down. It was the family group chat, a thread that usually remained dormant for weeks until someone felt the need to share a photo of a garden tomato or a vague complaint about the weather in Warren Cove. Today, however, it was active. My mother, Eleanor, big news. We have decided to do something special this summer. We are taking all the grandkids to Hawaii. A full week at the Royal Sands, sun, surf, and a reward for being such wonderful blessings. My heart gave a strange, stuttering little kick. Hawaii. I had not been on a vacation in 4 years, not since the divorce, and certainly nowhere that involved an airplane. I imagined Leo's face. He was 6 years old and obsessed with the ocean. He had books about coral reefs and sharks stacked by his bed. He would lose his mind. I smiled, my fingers hovering over the screen to type a thank you, to ask about dates. Then another text came through, a photo of a brochure, then a text from my sister-in-law, Sarah, with a string of palm tree emojis. Then a text from my younger sister, Bethany. OMG. The kids are screaming. Thank you, Mom and Dad. I scrolled up to the original message. I clicked on the little information icon to see who was included in the thread. My parents, Sarah and my brother, Mark, Bethany and her husband, Dave, and me. I went back to the message. All the grandkids. I waited for the follow-up text, the one that would ask for Leo's passport status, or ask if I could get the time off work to chaperone, or just acknowledge that my son, their grandson, was part of this grand declaration. The phone sat silent. I typed, my thumbs feeling heavy. This sounds amazing. What dates are you looking at? I need to check the school calendar for Leo. The 3 bubbles appeared, indicating someone was typing. Then they disappeared. Then they appeared again. My mother's reply popped up, blue and sharp against the white screen. Oh, Ruby, we didn't want to clutter the thread. We will explain later. This is a special arrangement. I stared at the words. We will explain later. I looked at the phrase all the grandkids in the first text. I counted in my head. Mark had 2 daughters. Bethany had a son and a daughter, and I had Leo, 5 grandchildren. But the thread was moving on. Bethany was asking about swimsuits. Sarah was asking about flight times. My mother was sending links to the resort, creating a wall of noise that buried my question. My stomach turned over. A slow, cold rotation. I knew that feeling. I had lived with that feeling for most of my adult life, specifically in the years since I had moved out, got married, got divorced, and refused to move back into the sphere of control my parents maintained over the family. It was the feeling of the floor dropping out, of the rules changing without notice. I texted my mother directly. Mom, is Leo going? No reply. I waited 10 minutes. I tried my father. Dad, I'm confused. Is Leo included in the trip? Nothing. I sat in my cubicle, the spreadsheet blurring in front of me. I could hear my coworker typing 3 feet away, the rhythmic clack, clack, clack of daily life continuing while my universe tilted on its axis. They were taking the grandchildren to Hawaii. They announced it to everyone, but they would not answer me. The silence was an answer. Sunday dinner was a mandatory institution in the Butler family. It was held in the house I grew up in, a sprawling colonial on the wealthy side of Warren Cove. With manicured hedges that looked like they were cut with a laser and a front door that always shone with fresh polish. I drove there with my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned the color of old milk. Leo was in the back seat, humming a song he had learned from a cartoon. He was wearing his nice shirt, the one with the collar, because my mother disliked t-shirts at the dinner table. "Mommy?" he asked. I looked at him in the rearview mirror. His eyes were wide, the color of oak, just like mine. "Yes." "Baby? Are we going to see Grandma and Grandpa?" "Yes," I said. "We are." "Good," he said decisively. "I want to tell them I got a star on my spelling worksheet." I swallowed a lump in my throat that felt like jagged glass. That is a great thing to tell them. We pulled into the driveway. Mark's SUV was already there, shiny and black. Bethany's minivan was parked next to it, my 10-year-old sedan, with the dent in the bumper from a parking lot hit and run I could not afford to fix. Looked like an intruder in the lineup. We walked inside. The house smelled of roast beef and expensive floor wax. It was the smell of my childhood, a scent that meant order and expectations. In the living room, it was chaos. My nieces and nephews were running in circles. Mark was holding a beer, laughing at something my father was saying. Bethany was showing Sarah something on her phone. When we walked in, the volume dropped. Just for a second, just a beat. Then it surged back up. But the frequency had changed. It was brighter, falser. "Ruby!" my mother cried out. She was wearing an apron that looked pristine, as if she never actually touched the food she cooked. She came over and offered her cheek for a kiss, avoiding a hug. "And Leo, tuck your shirt in." "Sweetie?" Leo immediately shoved his shirt into his waistband. "Grandma, I got a star on my spelling," he said. "That is nice," she said, her eyes already drifting over his head to look at Bethany's daughter, who was jumping on the sofa. "Chloe, get down from there before you break your neck." We moved to the dining room. The table was set with the good china, the gold-rimmed plates that we were only supposed to use for holidays. There were flowers in the center, birds of paradise, bright orange and blue, tropical. I sat Leo down next to me. He looked small in the high-backed chair. My father stood at the head of the table. He was a tall man, broad-shouldered, with silver hair that he combed back strictly. He was a pillar of the community, a man who sat on boards and committees, a man who cared deeply about how things looked. "Before we eat," he said, his voice booming, "a toast, to family, and to a summer we will never forget. To Hawaii," Bethany cheered, raising her wine glass. My heart hammered against my ribs. I looked at Leo. He was reaching for a bread roll. Oblivious. "Hawaii?" Leo asked, freezing with his hand on the bread basket. "Who is going to Hawaii?" My mother smiled, a tight, controlled expression. "We are all talking about a trip. Leo, eat your roll." "Are there turtles?" Leo asked, his eyes lighting up. "Teacher says Hawaii has big green turtles." "Yes," Mark said, cutting into his roast beef. "Huge turtles. And volcanoes. And dolphins," Chloe added. "Grandma said we can swim with dolphins." Leo looked at me, his face breaking into a wide, gap-toothed grin. "Mom! Dolphins!" I felt the eyes of the table on me. Sarah was looking down at her plate. Mark was chewing aggressively. Bethany was scrolling on her phone under the table. My parents were watching me, daring me to make a scene, daring me to break the facade of the happy Sunday dinner. "It sounds beautiful," I said, my voice sounding thin and reedy to my own ears. I reached out and put my hand on Leo's arm, a silent signal to wait. The dinner continued. They talked about flight upgrades. They talked about which resort wing was better, the ocean view or the garden view. They talked about buying new luggage. They talked about it as if Leo and I were not there, or as if we were transparent ghosts haunting the feast. Leo ate his roast beef, listening to them with rapt attention. He thought he was going. Why would he not? He was a grandchild. The text said all the grandkids. He was 6. He did not understand the politics of exclusion. He only understood that his family was going to a magical place with turtles, and he was part of the family. I could not eat. The meat tasted like ash. I pushed the potatoes around my plate, creating little hills and valleys, waiting for the torture to end. When the plates were cleared, I stood up. "Mom, do you need help with the coffee?" "That would be lovely." "Ruby," she said. I followed her into the kitchen. The door swung shut. Muffling the laughter from the dining room, the kitchen was gleaming, stainless steel and marble. My mother moved to the coffee maker. Her back to me. "Why?" I asked. She did not turn around. "Why what? Why is Leo not on the list?" I kept my voice low, steady. I would not give her the satisfaction of tears. "You said all the grandkids." She turned then, wiping her hands on a towel. She looked at me with an expression of weary patience, as if I were a toddler refusing to put on my shoes. "Ruby, be realistic. It is a long flight. It is a very active trip. Leo requires a lot of attention. He is 6, I said. Chloe is 5. Mason is 7. They are all going. It is about fairness," she said, the words slipping out of her mouth like a poisoned candy. "You do not let us have him enough. You are always busy. You have your rules about screen time and sugar and bedtime. We hardly know him. It would be unfair to the other children to have a dynamic that is strained." I stared at her. "I have rules because I am his mother, and you see him every Sunday. You see him more than I see my own friends. It is different," she said, waving her hand dismissively. "You hold him back. You are very controlling." "Ruby, we felt that a big trip like this, it is a reward for the families that are fully invested." "Invested?" I repeated. "I am here every week. I help you with your garden. I drive you to your eye appointments. Emotional investment," she said. "Trust." The kitchen door opened and my father walked in. He carried the scent of cologne and authority. He looked from me to my mother. Sensing the tension, "She is asking about the trip," my mother said, pouring cream into a pitcher. My father nodded. He leaned against the counter, crossing his arms. "It is not just a family trip. Ruby, it is a sponsored event." "Sponsored?" I asked. "The Harbor Light Community Circle," he said, naming the high society philanthropic group that practically ran Warren Cove. "I have been doing a lot of work with them. They are sponsoring a retreat for leadership families. It is a reward for participation, for community standing." He looked at me over his glasses. "We had a limited number of spots. We had to make choices based on who has earned it." The air left the room. "Earned it?" I whispered. "He is a 6-year-old boy. How does a child earn a vacation? By having a mother who doesn't work full-time? By having a father who didn't leave?" "Don't be dramatic," my father snapped. "This is exactly why we made the decision. You take everything as a personal attack. This is a celebration for the family members who have been consistent, who represent us well." "Represent you?" I felt a cold chill slide down my spine. "So Leo doesn't represent you?" "It is a complex situation," my father said, checking his watch. "We will bring him back a t-shirt. Maybe next time, if things improve, we can discuss including him, but the arrangements are made. Do not spoil this for your nieces and nephews." He picked up the coffee tray and walked out. My mother followed him, pausing at the door to give me a look of pity. "There is dessert on the counter. Bring it out when you are ready to be pleasant." I stood in the kitchen for a long time. I gripped the edge of the marble counter until my fingers turned white. I wanted to scream. I wanted to smash the expensive coffee pot on the floor, but I couldn't. I had to drive Leo home. I had to walk out there and pretend I wasn't bleeding out. I grabbed the tray of cookies and walked back into the dining room. Everyone was laughing. Leo was showing Mark a trick with a spoon. Mark looked up when I entered, his eyes sliding away from mine. He knew. They all knew. We left 20 minutes later. I told them I had a headache. As I was buckling Leo into his car seat, Sarah came out to the driveway. She was smoking a cigarette, hiding it behind her back like a teenager. "Ruby," she said softly. I straightened up. "I have to go." "Sarah, I didn't know," she said. She looked around to make sure no one was watching from the window. I honestly thought he was coming. "When they told us about the trip last month, they said—" I froze. "Last month?" Sarah winced. Yeah. They've been planning it since March. They told us they were taking every grandchild. They told the people at church they were taking the whole flock. I assumed you knew. They told people they were taking everyone, I said, the realization settling like lead in my stomach. Yeah, Sarah said. Look, just don't tell Mark I said anything. He thinks Mom and Dad are just worried about Leo being homesick. But it feels weird. Ruby, the way they talk about it, like it's a show. She stomped out the cigarette and hurried back inside. I got into the driver's seat. I sat there for a moment, listening to the engine idle. They had lied. They had told the world one story. The benevolent grandparents taking the whole clan to paradise. And then they had quietly, surgically, cut my son out of the picture. Mommy? Leo said from the back. When do we get on the plane? I put the car in reverse. We'll talk about it at home. Baby. The drive back to our apartment was silent. The streetlights flickered past, rhythmic bursts of orange light illuminating Leo's sleeping face in the mirror. He had fallen asleep 5 minutes in, clutching a plastic dinosaur. Our apartment was on the second floor of a complex that was clean but tired. The carpet in the hallway smelled of other people's dinners. I carried Leo up the stairs, his head heavy on my shoulder. I put him in his bed, taking off his shoes, covering him with the quilt my grandmother, my father's mother, had made years ago. I went into the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water. I didn't drink it. I just held the cold glass against my forehead. I walked into the living room and saw Leo's small table in the corner. His crayons were scattered. There was a piece of construction paper in the center. I picked it up. It was a drawing of a plane. A big, lopsided silver tube with wings. Underneath, in wobbly block letters, he had written, Hawaii. He had drawn 5 stick figures in the windows. I felt the sob build in my chest, a physical pressure that hurt my ribs. I dropped the paper and walked quickly to the laundry room, the only room in the apartment that didn't share a wall with a bedroom. I shut the door. I turned on the dryer. Even though it was empty, the hum filled the small space. I slid down the wall until I was sitting on the linoleum, and then I let it out. I cried for the humiliation of begging my mother for an explanation. I cried for the look on my father's face when he said, "Earned it." I cried for the lie I was going to have to tell my son when he woke up. We aren't going. How do you explain to a 6-year-old that his grandparents love him, but they don't like him? Or rather, they don't like his mother, and he is the collateral damage in a war he didn't enlist in? I sat there until the dryer buzzed, signaling the end of its empty cycle. I wiped my face with the hem of my shirt. I stood up. I was done crying. Crying was for people who had hope that the other side would see reason. My parents did not operate on reason. They operated on leverage. I went to the kitchen table and opened my laptop. I pulled out my phone. Understanding why. I whispered to myself. I opened the text thread with my mother. I scrolled back, way back, 2 years ago. I had told them I couldn't come to Christmas Eve dinner because I had the flu and didn't want to infect anyone. Response: a photo sent 3 days later of them taking the other grandkids to the Nutcracker. Such a shame Leo missed this tradition. 1 year ago, I told my father I wouldn't lend him money from my small savings to float a renovation project he was doing. I told him I needed it for Leo's potential dental work. Response: a week later, they announced they bought annual passes to the amusement park for Mark and Bethany's kids, a gift for the little ones. 6 months ago, my mother criticized my parenting in front of a neighbor, saying I was too soft. I pulled her aside and told her to never undermine me in public again. Response: the following weekend, they hosted a barbecue. I wasn't invited. When I asked, they said, "We thought you wanted space since you are so sensitive about public perception." The pattern was unmistakable. It was a mathematical equation. Boundary set equals privilege revoked. Refusal to comply equals exclusion enforced. They were training me, like a dog. If I bit the hand, I didn't get the treat. And now, the treat was Hawaii, and the punishment was publicly erasing my son. I picked up my phone and dialed Tessa. It was 10:30 at night, but Tessa Grant answered on the second ring. She had been my best friend since high school. She knew where the bodies were buried because she had helped me dig the graves of my past mistakes. "Tell me you didn't kill him," Tessa said by way of greeting. "I didn't," I said, "but I might." I told her everything: the text, the dinner, the fairness speech, the Harbor Light sponsorship, the drawing on the table. Tessa listened without interrupting, which was rare for her. When I finished, the silence on the line was heavy. "Ruby," she said finally, "you feel like you're losing your mind, right?" "I feel like I'm watching a movie." I said, "I feel like I'm watching a story being told where my kid doesn't exist. They're smiling and eating roast beef and planning this trip. And Leo is just invisible." "Okay," Tessa said. Her voice shifted. It became the voice she used when she was analyzing a case. She was a paralegal, and a damn good one. "Let's strip the emotion out of this for a second. I know that's hard. But look at the mechanics." "The mechanics? Who is paying?" Tessa asked. "Your dad said Harbor Light is sponsoring it?" "That's what he said. A reward for leadership families." "Bullshit," Tessa said. "Harbor Light is a community circle. They do food drives and scholarships. They don't pay for 5-star Hawaiian vacations for wealthy board members and their spawn. That would be embezzlement. Ruby, or at least a massive conflict of interest." I sat up straighter. "He said it was a reward. If Harbor Light is paying, there's a paper trail." Tessa said, "But if your parents are paying and just claiming it's a sponsorship to make themselves look important, that's a different game. Why now? Why this summer? They want to make memories." I said, quoting my mother. "No," Tessa said. "Narcissists don't want to make memories. They want to make monuments. They want something to point at. Think, Ruby." "What else is happening?" I rubbed my temples. "I don't know. Dad has been busy. Mom has been obsessed with her image lately. But that's normal." "Dig," Tessa said. "There is a reason they need this trip to look a certain way. And there is a reason Leo, unpredictable, not under their thumb Leo, is a liability to that image. Find out who is actually footing the bill." We hung up. My mind was racing. I went to my email. I had an old account that was linked to the family server from years ago. Back when my dad insisted we all have professional-looking email addresses for his consulting firm, even though I never worked for him, I rarely checked it. I logged in. My inbox was mostly spam and old forwards from my aunt. But there was a new message. It had arrived at 8 o'clock that evening. From Eleanor Butler. "Mark Butler, Bethany Klein, CC, my old email address." I stared at it. She must have autofilled the family group and forgotten to remove my old address. Or maybe she just didn't care. Subject: FWD, Logistics and Media. Prep for trip. I opened it. "Hi everyone. Please see the attached schedule from the coordinator. We need everyone to be at the fitting for the matching outfits on Thursday. The color palette is sunset gold and white. Also, please review the talking points for the short family interview. The video crew will be with us for the first 2 days to capture the arrival and the settling in moments. Remember, the theme is generational legacy. Mark, please make sure the girls have their lines learned for the beach segment. Love, Mom, I read it twice. Video crew, talking points, lines. This wasn't a vacation. It was a production. Tessa was right. They weren't going to Hawaii to swim with turtles. They were going to Hawaii to film a commercial for themselves. And Leo? Leo wasn't excluded because he was naughty. He wasn't excluded because I was controlling. He was excluded because he wasn't part of the script. He was the plot hole they were trying to edit out. I looked at the screen, the blue light reflecting in my eyes. The sadness in my chest began to harden. It cooled and solidified into something sharp, something heavy. They wanted a show? I closed the laptop. I was going to find out exactly who was producing it, and then I was going to rewrite the ending. The following morning, I drove to my parents' house. I did not call first. I knew their schedule better than I knew my own checkbook. My father would be in his study, reading the local paper with a red pen in hand, circling typos to mail to the editor. My mother would be in the sunroom. arranging flowers she had cut from the garden, waging a silent war against asymmetry. I parked my car on the street, not the driveway. It felt like a distinct choice, a separation of territories. I walked up the slate path, the morning sun hitting the polished brass knocker on the front door. I let myself in. The house was quiet, that heavy, expensive silence that absorbs sound. "Mom? Dad?" I called out. My father emerged from the study, his reading glasses perched on the end of his nose. He looked annoyed, not at me specifically, but at the interruption of his routine. "Ruby," he said, "is everything all right? Is Leo sick?" "Leo is fine." I said, "He is at school. I came to talk to you, both of you." My mother walked in from the back of the house, wiping her hands on a linen towel. She saw my face. No makeup, hair pulled back tight, eyes red-rimmed but dry, and her expression shifted from welcoming to guarded. "We have a busy morning." "Ruby," she said, checking the grandfather clock in the hall. "The landscapers are coming at 11. This won't take long." I said, "I just want to understand." I walked into the living room and sat in the wingback chair. I didn't wait for an invitation. They exchanged a look, a quick, microscopic communication of irritation, and followed me. My father remained standing by the fireplace, his arm resting on the mantel. My mother sat on the edge of the sofa, her posture rigid. "I want to ask you one question," I said, keeping my voice low and level. "If this trip is for the grandchildren, strictly for the grandchildren, why is one of them being left behind?" My father sighed. A long exhale through his nose. "We went over this on Sunday." "No." I said, "You threw words at me on Sunday. You said fairness and investment, but I want you to look at me and tell me how excluding a 6-year-old boy is fair. Explain the logic so a child could understand it, because eventually, I am going to have to explain it to him." "It is complicated," my mother said, smoothing her skirt. "It is not complicated." I said, "It is binary. He is either invited, or he is not. He is either your grandson, or he is not." "Don't be dramatic," my mother snapped. "Of course he is our grandson, but we have to do what is best for the group." "The group," I repeated. "The dynamic," she corrected herself. "We have a vision for this trip. It is educational. It is about heritage. Leo is... he is high energy. He requires a different kind of management. We did not want to put that burden on the other children. He is 6. I said, "Mason is 7. Mason set fire to your curtains last Thanksgiving. That was an accident," my mother cried. "And Leo asking for juice too loudly is a character flaw?" I asked. My father stepped forward. "Ruby, stop it. You are trying to make this about affection. It is not about affection. It is about logistics. And frankly, it is about you." "Me?" "Your attitude," he said. "You are always looking for a fight. You are always looking for a slight. If we took Leo, you would be calling us every hour, checking on him, telling us what he can eat, when he has to sleep. We want to enjoy this trip. We want to bond with the children without you hovering over us via FaceTime. So you punish the child to teach the mother a lesson?" I asked. "We are not punishing anyone," my mother said. Standing up, "We are making executive decisions. We are doing what is best. And frankly, Ruby, if you cannot accept that, then you are proving our point. Do not make this ugly. Do not make this into a tragedy. It is already ugly." I said, "You just painted a nice coat of varnish over it." "We are done discussing this," my father said, turning his back to me. "We have a lot to do. The trip is in 2 months. We expect you to be supportive. For the family." I stood up. I felt a strange vibration in my hands, a tremor of pure adrenaline. "I will be exactly as supportive as you have been transparent," I said. I walked out. As I reached the door, I heard my mother say, "She is impossible. I told you she would react like this." I drove to a coffee shop in the center of town, needing to be anywhere but my own head. I ordered a black coffee and sat in the corner, staring at the brick wall. My phone buzzed. It was my cousin, Mara Klein. Mara was the daughter of my father's estranged brother. She was allowed at family functions because she was successful. She ran a boutique marketing firm, but she was kept at arm's length because she asked too many questions. Saw your car leaving the HQ. Mara texted, "You okay? You look like you wanted to run over the mailbox." I called her. "They are icing him out." "Mara," I said without preamble, "they are taking everyone but Leo," I heard. Mara said. Her voice was low. She was probably at her office. Aunt Eleanor told my mom it was because Leo has behavioral challenges. He draws pictures of turtles and says please and thank you, I said, my voice cracking. His behavioral challenge is that his mother doesn't kiss the ring. "Listen," Mara said, "there is something you need to know. It's not just about the trip. Have you heard about the council?" "What council?" "The Warren Cove Heritage Council." Mara said, "Uncle Robert and Aunt Eleanor applied for the co-chair position. It is a big deal. It controls the preservation funds, the historical society, the summer gala. It is basically the crown jewel of local power." I frowned. "They are already on 5 boards. This is different," Mara said. "This is legacy stuff. And the application process? It is brutal. They interview your neighbors. They look at your finances. And they look at your family. The current chair is obsessed with traditional values." So, Mara said. "They have been curating a narrative for months. The perfect American grandparents. Generational wealth. Generational unity. I heard them talking at the club. They are pitching themselves as the patriarch and matriarch of a dynasty, a messy single mom with a difficult kid and an ex-husband who is in the wind. That doesn't fit the brochure. Ruby, they are hiding the cracks. I felt a coldness settle in my stomach. They are editing us out. They are airbrushing the family photo. Mara agreed. Hawaii isn't a vacation. It is a campaign stunt. They need footage of the happy, cohesive clan to play at the induction ceremony in the fall. How do you know this? Because my firm was asked to bid on the PR package for the council. Mara said dryly, "I saw the applicant list. Your parents are the frontrunners, but they have a stability flag on their file. Me." I said, "You," she said, "or rather, the perceived messiness of you. Be careful. Ruby, they are climbing a ladder, and they will kick anyone in the face who tries to slow them down." 3 days later, I walked into the Lion's Den. It was a fundraiser for the local library, held in the ballroom of the yacht club. I had to go. My boss was on the committee and had bought a table for the office. I wore a navy dress that I had owned for 5 years and kept my head high. My parents were there, of course. They were holding court near the silent auction tables. My mother was wearing a cream-colored silk suit that probably cost more than my car. My father was laughing at a joke made by the town mayor. I stayed on the periphery, holding a glass of sparkling water. I watched them. They were radiant. They were charming. They looked like the people on the front of a greeting card. I saw Mrs. Gable, the president of the garden club, approach them. I drifted closer, pretending to examine a gift basket of artisanal jams. "Eleanor," Mrs. Gable gushed, "I heard the wonderful news. You are taking the whole brood to the islands." My mother beamed. She reached out and touched Mrs. Gable's arm. "We are just so blessed," she said. "We wanted to give them the world. We are taking all the grandkids. A real adventure." "All of them?" Mrs. Gable asked. "That is quite an undertaking." 5 little ones?" "Every single one," my mother said firmly. "We couldn't imagine leaving anyone behind. It is all about making memories." I stood 10 feet away. I was in her direct line of sight. She looked right through me. Her eyes slid over my face as if I were a piece of furniture, a potted plant, a nothing. "We are taking all the grandkids." It wasn't just a lie. It was a public declaration of my son's non-existence. If she said all and Leo wasn't there, then Leo didn't count. He was a statistical error she was rounding down to 0. I felt a tap on my shoulder. It was Sarah, my sister-in-law. She looked anxious, clutching a clutch bag like a shield. "Hey," she whispered. "Are you okay?" "She just lied." I whispered back. "She just told Mrs. Gable she is taking everyone. Sarah bit her lip. I know. They have been saying that to everyone. Mark tried to correct Dad yesterday, and Dad told him to stop splitting hairs. He said all sounds better than most. My son is not a hair to be split. I said, I know. Sarah said, Look, Ruby, I feel sick about this. I really do. But Mark says we can't rock the boat. Dad is helping us with the down payment on the new house. If we make a scene. She trailed off. I looked at her. I saw the fear in her eyes. The same fear I had lived with for years. The fear of the cutoff. The fear of the cold shoulder. I understand. I said, and I did. They had bought her silence with a down payment. They were buying the grandkids with a vacation. Everything was a transaction. The following Saturday, I received an invitation, a text message from my Aunt Linda. Pre-trip send-off. Come have burgers and wish the travelers well. 2:00. It wasn't explicitly called a goodbye party, but that's what it was. I stared at the phone. If I didn't go, I was the bitter daughter who couldn't be happy for others. If I did go, I was the doormat. I looked at Leo. He was building a tower of blocks in the living room. He didn't know about the party. He didn't know about the trip details. He still thought Hawaii was a vague concept, like Mars or the future. Get your shoes on. Buddy, I said, we are going to see your cousins. Yay, he yelled, knocking the tower over. We arrived at Aunt Linda's house. The backyard was filled with smoke from the grill and the screaming of children. My parents were there, wearing matching polo shirts with the Harbor Light logo. Leo ran off to find Mason. I stood by the cooler, grabbing a soda. Ruby! It was Great Aunt Marge. She was 80, deaf in one ear, and had zero filter. Hello, Aunt Marge? I said, leaning down to kiss her cheek. So exciting, she shouted. Hawaii. I went there in 1972. The pineapples are delicious. Yes, I said. I heard. Where is your boy staying? She asked. Looking around. Is he in the suite with Eleanor? Or is he bunking with Mark's kids? The conversation nearby stopped. My mother was standing 3 feet away, holding a plate of potato salad. She froze. I looked at my mother. I waited for her to speak. I waited for her to explain to Marge that Leo wasn't going. My mother took a bite of potato salad and looked at the sky. I turned back to Marge. My face felt hot. Actually, Aunt Marge, Leo isn't going. What? Marge shouted. Why not? Is he sick? No, I said, forcing a smile that felt like it was going to crack my skin. The list was limited. It is a specific trip. That is nonsense. Marge declared, Eleanor, why isn't this boy going? My mother turned slowly. Marge, dear, it is complicated. Ruby and I decided it was best for Leo to stay in his routine. He gets very anxious with travel. She looked at me. Her eyes dared me to contradict her. Right. Ruby? I looked at Leo across the yard. He was laughing, chasing a bubble that Mason had blown. Right. I said. The word tasted like bile. Routine is important. I walked away. I went to the side of the house, near the garage, where the trash cans were kept. I needed to breathe. My brother, Mark, came around the corner a minute later. He held 2 beers. He offered me one. No thanks. I said. Rough in there, he said. He looked tired. He looked like a man who was carrying a weight he hadn't agreed to lift. They are unbelievable, I said. She just told Marge I decided to keep him home. I know. Mark said. Look, Ruby, don't start something today. Please. Mom is barely holding it together. She is stressed out of her mind about this trip. She is stressed? I laughed. A short, sharp sound. I am the one explaining to my son why he isn't good enough. It's not that, Mark said. There is a lot of pressure. From the sponsors, from the counsel thing. He lowered his voice. And the paperwork is a nightmare. They have been hounding me for birth certificates all week. I frowned. Birth certificates? Why? You all have passports. I know, Mark said. We went to Mexico last year. They have copies of everything. But Dad is insisting. He says he needs fresh certified copies for the travel insurance and the group registration. He was freaking out about it. calling me at 6 in the morning asking if I mailed them. That doesn't make sense. I said, travel insurance doesn't need a certified birth certificate if you have a passport. I don't know. Mark shrugged. I just sent them. I just want them off my back. Just keep your head down. Rube, let them have their parade. It will be over in 2 weeks. He walked back to the party. I stayed by the trash cans. Fresh certified copies. Group registration. My mind began to turn, the gears grinding against the rust of my trust. That night, after I put Leo to bed, telling him that the party was just a barbecue and not a send-off, I sat down at my computer. I needed clarity. I needed it in writing. Verbal conversations were smoke. They twisted and vanished. I needed a brick wall of text. I drafted an email to my mother. Mom, I am writing to ask for the specific details of the Hawaii trip. I want to know the exact dates, the itinerary, and the list of chaperones. I also want a written explanation of why Leo is excluded, for my own records, so I can explain it to him when he is older. Ruby. I sent it. The reply came 20 minutes later. Dear Ruby, we are acting in the children's best interests. This decision was made after careful consideration of the group dynamics and the goals of the retreat. We are saddened that you continue to view this through a lens of conflict rather than cooperation. We will provide details upon our return. Love, Mom. I stared at the screen. Acting in the children's best interests, lens of conflict, goals of the retreat. My mother did not write like that. My mother wrote in exclamation points and run-on sentences. She wrote, "It will be fun, and don't forget your sweater." This email was surgical. It was defensive. It was drafted. I forwarded it to Tessa. Who wrote this? I texted. Tessa called me immediately. That is a lawyer, she said, or a crisis PR manager. Acting in the best interests is the phrase you use when you are preparing for a custody battle or a negligence suit. It is the shield you put up before the arrows start flying. Why do they need a shield? I asked. It is a vacation. It is not a vacation, Tessa said. I told you, it is a production. Someone is advising them. Someone told them to shut you down in writing so you can't claim discrimination or exclusion later. Who is this Heritage Council contact? I don't know. I said, but Mark mentioned something weird. They are demanding certified birth certificates. For everyone. For the trip? That's what they said. Travel insurance. Ruby, Tessa said, her voice dropping an octave. You don't need certified birth certificates for travel insurance if you have passports. You need certified birth certificates for 2 things. Getting a passport or opening a trust. The word hung in the air. Trust. I have to go. I said, dig. Tessa said, dig deep. I hung up. I went back to the old family email folder, the one I had checked days ago. I needed to see what else was there. I searched the sent folder. Nothing. I searched the drafts. There was one draft saved. It was titled, Hawaii Budget plus Donor Talking Points. My hand trembled as I clicked it. It was a spreadsheet. It was a master plan. Column A, logistics, flights, hotel, Royal Sands Presidential Villa, private catamaran, videographer, 3 days. Column B, optics, grandparents. As anchors of the family unit, visuals of unity and continuity, emphasis on philanthropic values passed down. Note, ensure consistent messaging regarding the number of participants. The whole family plays better than selected members. I felt sick. The whole family plays better. I scrolled down. Budget breakdown. Flights, $25,000. Accommodation, $40,000. Media team, $8,000. Funding sources, personal contribution, $10,000. Sponsorship, Harborlight, $5,000. Education fund transfer, $58,000. I stopped breathing. Education fund transfer. I stared at the number. $58,000. My grandparents, my father's parents, had started an education fund when we were kids. They had set it up to grow, intended for the great-grandchildren. I knew it existed. I remembered my grandmother talking about it before she passed. She called it the seed corn. she said. This is for the little ones to go to college. All of them. I had never seen a statement. My father was the trustee. He always said, "It is growing. Don't worry about it. It will be there when they are 18. Education fund transfer. Completed." They weren't just excluding my son. They were paying for his cousin's vacation and their own vanity project with money that belonged to him, money that was meant for his future. I looked at the date on the draft. It was from 2 weeks ago. I closed my eyes. The pieces clicked together with a terrifying precision. The exclusion wasn't just about spite, it was about leverage. If they took Leo, I would be there, or at least involved. If I was involved, I might ask questions. I might ask about the budget. I might ask why the seed corn was being spent on lays and drone footage, by cutting us out. By painting me as unstable and Leo as difficult, they discredited me in advance. If I complained now, I was just the jealous, bitter daughter. No one would listen to the jealous daughter when the glowing grandparents were on stage. They were stealing from my son to pay for the camera crew that would film them erasing him. I opened a new document on my laptop. I named it Timeline. I started typing. Date, May 12th. Notification of trip. Date, May 15th. The lie. All grandkids. Date, May 20th. The discovery. Education fund. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to cry in the laundry room anymore. I was going to gather every receipt, every email, every lie. They wanted a story about family values? I was going to give them a story about family values, the real ones, the kind that cost you everything. I picked up my phone and took a photo of the screen, capturing the spreadsheet before they could delete it. Then I called the only bank I remembered my grandmother ever using. It was a long shot, but the war had started, and I was done bringing a knife to a gunfight. The next morning, I sat at my kitchen table with a notepad, a pen, and a cup of coffee that had gone cold 20 minutes ago. The sun was streaming through the window, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. A deceptively peaceful backdrop for the war I was currently waging. I dialed the number for North Bay Family Credit Union. It was a small regional institution, the kind that still gave out lollipops at the drive-thru and had a pot of stale coffee in the lobby. My grandmother, the formidable but loving Rose Butler, had banked there for 40 years. She didn't trust the big national chains. She liked to look the teller in the eye. The phone rang 3 times before a woman picked up. North Bay Family Credit Union. This is Sharon. How can I help you? Hi? Sharon? I said, keeping my voice bright and non-threatening. My name is Ruby Butler. I am calling regarding a family account that my grandmother, Rose Butler, set up some years ago. It was an education fund for her grandchildren. There was a pause, the sound of typing in the background. I see a few accounts associated with the Butler name. Are you a signatory on the account? I am a beneficiary. I said, I believe my father, Robert Butler, is the trustee. I haven't received a statement in a while, and I just wanted to check on the status. I am doing some financial planning for my son. One moment, Sharon said. I waited. The hold music was a tinny, instrumental version of a Beatles song. I tapped my pen against the notepad. Seed corn. That is what Grandma Rose called it. This is the seed corn, Ruby. You don't eat it, you plant it. Sharon came back on the line. Her voice had cooled. Ms. Butler, I am afraid I cannot discuss the details of that account with you. You are not listed as an authorized party for inquiries. I understand. I said, but can you just confirm it is still active? I don't need the balance. I just need to know it exists. I cannot give out specific account information. She repeated, reciting the script. However, I can see that the accounts under that primary household were recently consolidated. My pen stopped tapping. Consolidated? Merged, she said, into a new trust vehicle. If you have questions, you would need to speak to the trustee. The changes were processed last month. Last month, I echoed. Yes, she said. Have a nice day. Ms. Butler, the line went dead. I sat there, the receiver still pressed to my ear. Consolidated, merged, processed last month, just in time for the Hawaii bookings. I needed to be sure. I couldn't launch an accusation based on a hint from a bank teller named Sharon. I needed a reaction. I needed to see the whites of their eyes. I drove over to my parents' house an hour later. It was a Wednesday, which meant my father would be supervising the yard work. He didn't actually do the work, of course. He hired a crew, but he liked to walk around with his hands behind his back, pointing at shrubs that needed trimming, feeling like the lord of the manor. I found him by the hydrangeas. He was wearing his khaki gardening hat, looking every inch the benevolent retiree. "Ruby," he said, surprised. "I didn't know you were coming by. I was just in the neighborhood." I lied. "I wanted to drop off a book Leo finished. He thought you might like the pictures." I held up a library book about sharks. It was a prop, a shield. "Oh," he said, glancing at it without interest. "Put it on the porch." "Dad," I said, keeping my tone casual, light, as if I were asking about the weather. "I was going through some of my old papers this morning, financial stuff. I remembered Grandma Rose's education fund. Is that still a thing? I haven't seen a statement in years." His reaction was immediate and visceral. He didn't look at me. He looked down at the hydrangea bush. Then he laughed. A sharp, barking sound that had no humor in it. He took a step away from me, physically creating distance. My God. "Ruby," he said, shaking his head. "You are obsessed with money, aren't you?" "I am asking a question." I said, "It is not an obsession. It is," he snapped, turning to face me. His face was flushed, a blotchy red that crept up from his neck. "Every time you come over here, it is about what you are owed, what you didn't get. You are like a vulture circling. I have never asked you for money." I said, my voice steady despite the pounding in my chest. "I pay my own rent. I pay for my own car. I am asking about a fund Grandma left for the kids. It is being managed," he shouted. "It is being managed by people who understand finance, unlike you. Why do you always have to dig? Why can't you just trust that we have things under control? Because you are taking a $58,000 vacation," I said, "and my son isn't invited." He froze. The color drained from his face, then rushed back in double force. "That is private family business," he hissed. "Don't you dare come here and audit me. I am your father." "Then act like it," I said. He turned and walked away, marching toward the garage with stiff, angry strides. "Get off my property. Ruby." Before I say something I regret. I watched him go. He hadn't denied it. He hadn't said, "The fund is safe." He hadn't said, "It is sitting in a low-risk bond." He had attacked me. He had called me a vulture. That was the tell. In poker, it is a twitch of the eye. In the Butler family, it is an explosion of righteous indignation. He was guilty. I drove straight to Mara Klein's office. Mara's boutique marketing firm was located in a renovated loft downtown. It was all exposed brick and glass walls. Screaming, "Modern competence," Mara was the black sheep who had made good. She had tattoos she covered with blazers, and she knew more about the town's secrets than the priest. I sat in her office, recounting the conversation with my father. He snapped. I said, "He completely lost it." Mara leaned back in her chair, tapping a stylus against her lip. Classic Uncle Robert. "Attack the messenger so you don't have to read the message." Sharon at the credit union said, "Consolidated," I said, and Dad said, "Managed." But he looked like he was going to throw up. Mara spun her chair around to her computer. Okay, if they consolidated it, they had to move it. If they moved it into a new trust or amended the old one, there might be a filing. Trusts are private, usually, but if they changed the trustees or the name, sometimes there is a paper trail in the county clerk's records. Especially if they used the house as collateral or linked it to a property entity. She typed furiously, "I have a subscription to the Enhanced Public Records database. Let's see what the Butler dynasty is up to." I watched her screen. A blur of scrolling text. "Butler, Butler," Mara muttered. "Okay, here is the deed to the house. Here is the lien from the renovation in 2010. Here. Hello." She stopped scrolling. What? I asked, leaning forward. Butler Family Educational Trust. She read, Notice of change of trustee incite, filed 6 weeks ago. She clicked the document to open the PDF. Grantor, Rose Butler, deceased. Current trustee, Robert Butler. Successor trustee removed. She squinted. It says the independent co-trustee, Mr. Henderson, resigned. Mr. Henderson? I asked. Grandma's old lawyer? Looks like it, Mara said. And look here. Amendment to Section 4. Discretionary distributions. It says the trustee, your dad, now has sole and absolute discretion to determine distributions based on conduct, character, and family standing. Family standing? I whispered. That is not standard language. Ruby, Mara said grimly. That is control freak language. And look at the signature on the witness line. She zoomed in. Mark Butler, my brother. Mark signed this? I asked, the betrayal hitting me harder than the legalese. He witnessed the amendment. Mara said, which means he knew they were changing the rules. They removed the neutral oversight. Ruby, they kicked out the old lawyer and rewrote the bylaws so they could spend the money however they wanted, as long as they deemed it appropriate for family standing. Hawaii, I said. Hawaii is the family standing. Exactly, Mara said. They turned the education fund into a slush fund for the good family members, and they got Mark to sign off on it. I felt sick, physically sick. My brother, the one who had told me to keep my head down at the barbecue, print it. I said. Mara hit the print button. Be careful with this. Ruby, this is a grenade. I am not the one who pulled the pin. I said. I took the document and went back to my parents' house. I didn't care that my father had told me to leave 2 hours ago. I didn't care about the landscapers who were now blowing leaves in the driveway. I walked to the back door and knocked hard. My mother answered. She looked annoyed, holding a vase of lilies. Ruby? I thought you left. I did. I said, then I found this. I held up the paper. She squinted at it. Then her face tightened. She recognized the font. She recognized the header. Where did you get that? She demanded. That is a private legal document. It is a public record. I said, Mara found it in 2 minutes. You changed the trust. Mom, you removed Mr. Henderson. You changed the rules so Dad could decide who gets the money. She pulled me inside and shut the door, checking to make sure the landscapers hadn't seen. Lower your voice, she hissed. You do not understand how these things work. I understand perfectly. I said, Grandma left that money for college. For all of us. For Leo. And you are using it to pay for the Royal Sands and a videographer. We are investing in the family, she cried, her voice rising. That money was sitting there doing nothing. We are using it to build bonds, to create a legacy, and Leo is covered separately. Ruby, you are panicking over nothing. Covered separately? I asked. Show me. Show me the account where Leo's share is sitting. Show me the statement. She crossed her arms. I will not. Why not? Because you are weaponizing paperwork, she shouted. You are coming into my house, waving papers around, trying to catch us in a lie. It is ugly. Ruby, it is so ugly. If I show you the account, you will just find something else to criticize. You are looking for a fight. I am looking for the truth, I said. If Leo is covered, show me. Prove to me that you didn't steal his college fund to pay for a vow renewal. It is not stealing, she screamed. It is discretion. And frankly, looking at your life, looking at how you live, we have to protect that money. We can't just hand it over to someone who might squander it. Squander it? I asked. I work 6 days a week. You are unstable, she said, the word landing like a slap. You are emotional. We are protecting Leo's future from you. I stared at her. The gaslighting was breathtaking. They were spending the money on a luxury vacation to boost their social status, and they were claiming they were doing it to protect the money from me. I turned and walked out. There was no point in arguing with a delusion that strong. As I reached my car, my sister-in-law, Sarah, pulled into the driveway. She saw my face and rolled down her window. "Ruby?" she asked. "What happened?" I leaned against her car door. I felt like I might collapse. They changed the trust. "Sarah, Mark signed it. They are spending the education money on the trip." Sarah closed her eyes. She gripped the steering wheel. "Oh, God. You knew?" I asked. "I didn't know about the money." She said quickly, "I swear. Mark just said he had to sign some administrative stuff. But what?" She looked at me, her eyes full of tears. "I heard them talking. Last week, after Sunday dinner, Mom was talking about the budget, and Dad asked if they should set aside a portion for Leo, just in case you made a fuss. And Mom said—" Sarah swallowed hard. "Mom said, 'Don't bother. The boy won't be around long-term anyway.'" The world stopped spinning. "What did she mean?" I whispered. "Is she threatening him?" "No," Sarah said, reaching out to touch my hand. "No, not like that. She meant, she thinks you're going to leave. She thinks you're going to meet some guy or get a new job and move across the country to start over. She calls you a flight risk." She said, "Ruby never stays put. Why invest in a child who's going to end up in Ohio or Oregon in a year?" I stood up straight. It wasn't a threat. It was a dismissal. It was a complete and total lack of faith in my stability, my home, my life. I had lived in Warren Cove for 33 years. I had never left. But because I didn't live their way, they assumed I was temporary. My son was temporary. "Thank you for telling me," I said. My voice sounded dead. "I am so sorry." Sarah said, "I should have told you sooner." "It's okay," I said. "Now I know." I drove to Mark's office. He was an accountant. He worked in a glass building near the marina. I walked past the receptionist without stopping. I opened his door. He was on the phone. He looked up, saw my face, and hung up without saying goodbye to the person on the other line. "Ruby," he said, "what are you doing here?" I slapped the paper Mara had printed onto his desk. "You signed it," I said. "You witnessed the amendment." Mark looked at the paper. He paled. "Ruby, listen, Dad told me it was just a simplification. He said the old lawyer was charging too many fees and they wanted to move it in-house. Did you read it?" I asked. "Did you read the part about sole discretion? Did you read the part where they can cut Leo out based on family standing?" Mark rubbed his face. "I skimmed it. Dad said you were on board. He said he talked to you and you agreed that he should manage the investments directly. He lied to you." I said, "And you believed him because it was easier than checking with me. I didn't think—" "You didn't think," I interrupted. "And because you didn't think, you handed them the keys to the vault. They are using that money for Hawaii. Mark, they are using the seed corn to pay for your hotel room. Did you know that?" Mark looked sick. He looked at the document, then at me. "I thought they were paying for the trip. They said they had a windfall." "This is the windfall," I said. "My son's future. Your daughter's future. They are burning it to keep themselves warm." Mark sank back into his chair. "I can't undo it. I signed it." "No," I said, "you can't. But you can remember this moment. You can remember that you helped them do it." I walked out. I left the paper on his desk. I picked up Leo from school at 3 o'clock. He ran to me, holding a painting of a flower. "Mommy, look, it's a hibiscus, for Hawaii." My heart broke all over again. "It's beautiful." "Baby," I said, hugging him tight. I smelled his hair, shampoo and playground dust. "Listen, we are going to do something fun today. Just us." "Are we going to the travel store?" he asked. "No," I said. "We are going to the aquarium. We are going to see the sharks." "Really?" His eyes went wide. "On a Wednesday?" "On a Wednesday," I confirmed. We spent the afternoon looking at fish. I bought him a stuffed stingray. I bought him ice cream. I laughed when he made faces at the grouper. I created a bubble of joy around him, a force field to keep the poison of my family out. But kids are smart. They are emotional Geiger counters. In the car on the way home, Leo was quiet. He stroked the stingray's fin. "Mommy?" he asked softly. "Yeah. Bud? Did I do something wrong?" I looked at him in the rearview mirror. "What do you mean?" "Grandma and Grandpa," he said. They don't look at me anymore. And you are sad, even when you smile. Your eyes are sad. Is it because I didn't clean my room? I pulled the car over. I put it in park. I turned around to face him. Leo, I said firmly, look at me. He looked up, his lower lip trembling. You did nothing wrong. I said, 0. Nothing. You are perfect. Adults make weird choices sometimes. They make mistakes. And sometimes they are confusing. But you are not the reason. You are never the reason. I love you. And we are a team. Okay? Okay, he whispered. We are the best team. I said, better than any group text. He smiled, a little shakily. We are the shark team. Exactly, I said, the shark team. That night, after Leo was asleep, I went back to the laptop. I was exhausted, but my mind was vibrating with a cold, clear energy. I had the what, the money. I had the how, the trust. Now I needed the why, the real why. I went back to the email dump I had saved. I searched for Harbor Light. I found a thread I had missed earlier. It was between my mother and a woman named Cynthia at the Harbor Light Community Circle. Subject, Gala Feature, The Butler Legacy. Hi, Eleanor. We are so excited about the video segments for the upcoming gala. As discussed, we want to feature the Butler family as our spotlight on generational values. Since we will be filming the Family Fun segment on location in Hawaii, we need to make sure the visual is consistent. We are looking for that perfect grandparents as the anchor shot. 3 generations, united in service and joy. Regarding the script, we want to focus on unity and cohesion. Any outliers or complex dynamics might distract from the core message of stability that the Heritage Council is looking for. Please confirm the final head count for the shoot so we can arrange the blocking. We need to make sure everyone on camera is signed off and on brand. Best, Cynthia. My mother's reply. Hi, Cynthia. Confirmed. The group is set. We have streamlined the participants to ensure the most cohesive narrative. You will have the perfect family visual. No distractions. We are curating the group to ensure the message is flawless. Eleanor. I sat back, streamlined, no distractions. Curating the group, that was it. That was the smoking gun. They weren't worried about Leo's behavior. They weren't worried about my instability. They were casting a movie, and in their movie, a single mother and a fatherless boy were distractions. We were outliers. We didn't fit the perfect family visual they needed to secure their spot on the Heritage Council. They were literally editing us out of the frame to sell a lie about family unity. My anger, which had been a hot, chaotic thing for days, suddenly cooled into something solid, something useful. They wanted a story? They wanted to present themselves as the model of American values? Fine. But if they were going to use my son's inheritance to pay for their propaganda, I wasn't going to let them get away with it. I needed one more thing. I had the trust amendment, but that could be spun as administrative. I had the email, but that could be spun as misinterpretation. I needed something undeniable, something that proved, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that the money they were spending was explicitly intended for all the grandchildren, and that using it for this trip was a betrayal of the original intent. I needed Grandma Rose, and I knew exactly who might still have her voice preserved. I picked up my phone and scrolled to a number I hadn't called in years. Elaine Mercer, Grandma's best friend, the woman who kept everything. I hit send. The drive to Linden Harbor took 40 minutes, leading me away from the manicured, salt-sprayed perfection of Warren Cove and into a city that felt more functional, more grounded in the reality of commerce and concrete. I had an appointment with Elias Sterling, a family law attorney recommended by a friend of a friend who swore he was the kind of lawyer who didn't bark, but bit hard when it mattered. His office was on the 4th floor of a brick building that smelled of old paper and lemon polish. Mr. Sterling was a man in his 60s with a face that looked like it had been carved out of driftwood, lined, weathered, but durable. He listened to me for 20 minutes without interrupting, his pen scratching across a yellow legal pad. So, he said, finally setting the pen down, Let me make sure I understand the landscape. You believe the trust was altered to exclude your son based on personal grievances, and you have evidence that funds from said trust are being used to pay for a vacation that is effectively a public relations campaign for your parents. Yes, I said. My brother witnessed the signature on the amendment. He told me he didn't read it closely, but he knows it changed the trustee powers. Mr. Sterling leaned back in his leather chair, steepling his fingers. Trust law is a peculiar beast. Miss Butler, it is designed to protect the wishes of the grantor, your grandmother. However, if the trust instrument gave the trustee, your father, broad powers to amend, or if he coerced the amendment under false pretenses, that is actionable, but it is a high bar. I don't want to sue my family. I said, the words tasting like ash. I just want them to stop. I want them to acknowledge that they are stealing from my son. If you want them to stop, you have to show them you are capable of starting. Mr. Sterling said. His voice was calm, devoid of the emotional static that had been filling my head for days. You need to request a formal accounting. You need the full trust instrument, not just the amendment summary, and you need to do it in writing, sent via certified mail. It signals that you are no longer operating as a daughter, but as a beneficiary. They will hate that. I said, they already exclude you. He pointed out gently. You cannot lose favor you do not have, but listen to me closely. Do not make accusations you cannot prove. Do not use words like steal or fraud in your correspondence yet. Ask for clarification. Ask for the line items. Let the documents convict them. He handed me a draft of a letter he had scribbled out. Send this. It is polite, it is legal, and it is a warning shot. I left his office feeling lighter, anchored by the weight of professional strategy. I went to the post office immediately. I sent the letter certified. Return receipt requested. I watched the clerk stamp it, a heavy thud-thud that felt like the closing of a door and the opening of a vault. 3 days later, a courier envelope arrived at my apartment. It wasn't the full accounting I had asked for. That would take weeks. Mr. Sterling had warned, but it was a preliminary disclosure packet. I sat at my kitchen table, pushing aside Leo's cereal bowl, and opened it. The document was thick, bound with a heavy staple. I flipped past the standard boilerplate until I found the amendment section Mara had found online. But this was the full text. Amendment 4. Discretionary Distribution Standards. I read the paragraph twice, then a third time. The trustee shall have sole and absolute discretion to make distributions for education, travel, and cultural enrichment to beneficiaries who demonstrate consistent family participation and household stability. The trustee may withhold distributions from any beneficiary whose custodial environment is deemed, in the trustee's sole judgment, to be inconsistent with the values of the Butler Family Trust. I felt the blood drain from my face. Household stability, consistent family participation, inconsistent with the values. It wasn't just about money. They had codified their judgment of me into a legal weapon. Household stability was a direct attack on my status as a single mother. It was a dog whistle that meant, because she is divorced and works too much. Consistent family participation was a trap. If I set a boundary, if I skipped a dinner, I was no longer participating, and therefore, they could cut off my son's funding. It was brilliant, in a sick, controlling way. They hadn't just written me out. They had created a system where I had to dance for every dollar. If I wanted Leo to go to college, I had to show up for every photo op. I had to smile at every insult. I had to be the dutiful daughter, or my son would pay the price. I was shaking. I wanted to rip the paper in half. Instead, I took a photo of it and uploaded it to the cloud folder I had named Evidence. My phone rang. It was Mark. I hadn't spoken to him since I left the document on his desk. Ruby, he said. He sounded exhausted. Can I come over? Leo is here. I said, I don't want him hearing any of this. I'll wait in the car. He said, please. He arrived 10 minutes later. I went down to the parking lot. He was sitting in his SUV, the engine idling. He looked terrible. Eyes shadowed, tie loosened. the look of a man who had been sleeping on a couch. I got into the passenger seat. What happened? He gripped the steering wheel. I talked to them. I went over there last night. I told them I knew about the trust amendment. I told them you knew. And? It was a disaster. Mark said. He laughed, a dry, humorless sound. Mom didn't deny it. She didn't even try to explain the legal side. She just broke down. Crying? Not sad crying, Mark said. Angry crying. She started screaming about how you were ruining everything. She said you have always been the difficult one, the one who has to make everything about yourself. I am making it about my son. I said quietly, I know. Mark said, I tried to tell her that. I said, Mom, you cut a 6-year-old out of a college fund. And she said, we are saving the family. He turned to look at me. She gave this whole speech. Ruby, she said the family brand has been damaged. She said there have been embarrassments over the last few years. Embarrassments? She meant the divorce, Mark said, looking down. And the time you told Dad to shut up at Thanksgiving. And the fact that you drive a dented car. She thinks we look messy. She thinks the Heritage Council spot is the only way to fix our reputation in town. She called it a restoration campaign. A restoration campaign. I repeated, with my son as the sacrifice. There is more, Mark said. He hesitated, rubbing his jaw. I didn't know this until last night. Dad let it slip while Mom was hyperventilating. What? The Hawaii trip, Mark said. It's not just a vacation, and it's not just the interviews. He took a breath. They are renewing their vows, he said. On the beach, at sunset, they have a celebrant coming in. They invited the board of the Harbor Light Circle and the Heritage Council president. It's going to be a full ceremony. I stared at him. The absurdity of it washed over me. A vow renewal. That's what this is? I asked. A wedding? Basically, Mark said. A $30,000 recommitment ceremony to prove to the donors that the Butler marriage is the bedrock of the community. And the grandkids, the props. I finished. Exactly, Mark said. Dad said they need the heartwarming backdrop. They want a photo of the two of them at the altar, with all the grandkids in white linen standing around them, like cherubs. And Leo doesn't fit the cherub aesthetic. I said, they think he would fidget, Mark admitted, his voice barely a whisper. They think he would cry or run off or distract from them. They want a perfect picture. Ruby, one frame where they look like royalty, and they didn't want to risk Leo messing up the shot. I felt a cold, hard clarity settle in my chest. It wasn't hatred. It was something deeper. It was a complete loss of respect. They were willing to inflict a lifelong wound on a child because they were afraid he might ruin a photo op for a vanity wedding. Thank you for telling me. I said, I am not going to let them use my kids like that. Mark said, I told Sarah, we are talking about, I don't know, pulling out. Don't? I said. He looked surprised. What? Don't pull out, I said. If you pull out, they will spin it. They will say you were sick or busy. They will control the narrative. Let them have their production. Just don't sign anything else. I got out of the car. As I walked back up to my apartment, I knew what was coming next. Now that they knew I knew, they would try to buy my silence. The summons came the next day. A text from my father. We need to talk. Come to the house at 6. Without Leo. I arranged for a sitter. I put on a blazer. I treated it like a business meeting, because that is what it was, a negotiation with terrorists. When I arrived, the house was staged. Soft jazz was playing. There was a pitcher of iced tea on the coffee table. My mother was sitting on the sofa, looking fragile and tragic. My father was in the armchair, looking stern. I sat on the ottoman. I didn't drink the tea. Ruby, my father began. Mark tells us you are upset about the trust language. I am not upset. I said, I am informed. There is a difference. That language is standard for high-value estates, he said, waving a hand. It is designed to protect the assets. It is designed to control the beneficiaries. I corrected. But we are not here to debate legal theory. Why am I here? My mother sniffed. We want to make peace. Ruby, we hate this tension. It is bad for your health. It is bad for the family. Then include Leo. I said, simple. We cannot change the Hawaii plans now, she said quickly. The tickets are booked. The rooms are set. The arrangements are finalized. The vow renewal. I said. She froze. Her eyes darted to my father. Mark told you? Yes, I said. Congratulations. I hope the photos are worth it. My father leaned forward. Look, Ruby, we are willing to make a compromise. We understand you feel left out. So here is the offer. He paused, letting the weight of his beneficence hang in the air. If you can be supportive. He said, if you can change your attitude, if you attend the send-off party next week, and bring Leo, and smile, and participate in the pre-trip filming session we have scheduled here at the house. The filming session? I asked. The Harbor Light crew is coming on Monday. My mother interjected, to get some B-roll of the family home, casual shots, playing in the yard, board games. If you do that, my father continued, and if you stop this nonsense with the lawyer letters, we will reconsider including Leo on the next trip. We are thinking of Aspen in the winter. If his behavior, and yours, warrants it. I looked at them. They were offering me a carrot, a hypothetical carrot, dangling 6 months in the future, in exchange for my immediate compliance and my son's participation in a commercial for a trip he wasn't allowed to take. They wanted me to bring Leo to the house, have him filmed playing with the cousins who were going to Hawaii, use his image to sell their family unity narrative, and then leave him behind while they flew to paradise. It was breathtakingly cruel. Let me get this straight, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. You want me to lend you my son for the photo op? You want him to perform for the camera so you look like inclusive grandparents, and in exchange, you might take him on a trip later. If I behave? It is a path forward, my mother said. It is a chance to rebuild trust. Trust? I laughed. You are asking me to barter my child's dignity for a lottery ticket. You want him to be a prop in a movie about a family he isn't allowed to be part of. He is part of the family, my mother cried. We love him. You love him like you love a throw pillow. I said, you love him when he matches the decor. But you don't respect him, and you certainly don't respect me. I stood up. No, I said, Ruby, my father warned, his face hardening into stone. Think very carefully. If you walk out now, you are burning the bridge. We are offering you an olive branch. You are offering me a leash, I said, and I am not a dog. Then you have made your choice, he said cold. Final. You are the one excluding him now. You are the one denying him a future with this family. I am denying you the right to use him. I said, there is a difference. I walked out. I didn't slam the door. I closed it gently, with the finality of a coffin lid. As I drove away, my hands were shaking on the wheel, not from fear, but from the sheer, vibrating rage of seeing them so clearly. They truly believed they were the victims. They truly believed that my refusal to let them exploit my son was an act of aggression. The next morning, I was at work, trying to focus on a shipping manifest, when my cell phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. Hello, this is Ruby. Hi, Ms. Butler? This is Jessica from the Harbor Light Community Circle. I'm the event coordinator for the gala media segments. I stiffened. Yes, I am just calling to follow up on the media release form for Leo, she said, her voice cheerful and brisk. We have the signed forms for all the other grandchildren, and your mother mentioned you were bringing yours by the house during the shoot on Monday. But I actually need it on file before the crew arrives. My mind raced. My mother told you I was signing it? Yes, Jessica said. She said you were all on board. She actually sent over a preliminary consent via email saying you had verbally agreed. But our legal team really prefers the wet signature. They had lied. Again, they had told the production team I was in, assuming they could bully me into it at the last minute. Or worse, they planned to forge it if I didn't show up. Jessica, I said, keeping my voice very calm. I am glad you called. Great, she said. Can I email you the PDF? No, I said. You cannot. There was a pause. I'm sorry? My mother was mistaken. I said, I have not agreed to participate. My son, Leo, will not be participating. He is not going on the trip, and he will not be in the filming session. The silence on the other end was heavy. Oh, Jessica said. The cheerfulness evaporated, replaced by professional alarm. I see. Mrs. Butler indicated that the entire family was participating. The whole concept of the segment is the full circle. If a grandchild is missing, then the concept is inaccurate. I said, Leo is not part of the Hawaii trip. He was excluded, so representing him as part of the narrative would be misleading to your donors, wouldn't it? I heard Jessica typing furiously in the background. Excluded? Okay, this is unexpected. We have a script that specifically mentions all the generations united. Then you might need to rewrite the script. I said, and Jessica? Yes? If any footage of my son appears in your gala video, even in the background, even from an old photo, I will consider it a violation of his privacy rights. I have not consented, and I will not consent. Understood, Jessica said. Her voice was tight. I will have to speak to the board. And Mrs. Butler, thank you for clarifying. She hung up. I put the phone down. My heart was pounding. I had just pulled the thread. I had just embarrassed them professionally. I had exposed the lie to the very people they were trying to impress. The backlash would be instant. I knew it. I stared at the phone, waiting for it to ring, waiting for my father's rage, waiting for my mother's hysterics. But the phone didn't ring. Instead, a notification popped up. A text message. It wasn't from my parents. It wasn't from Mark. It was from a number I had saved years ago. Under the name Mrs. Mercer, Elaine Mercer, my grandmother's best friend, the woman I had reached out to days ago, leaving a voicemail that felt like a prayer thrown into the void. I opened the message. Ruby, dear, I received your message. I am so sorry for what is happening. Rose would be spinning in her grave. She hated secrets, and she hated unfairness. I held my breath. A second message appeared, an image. It looked like a photo of a yellow document, handwritten on heavy stationery. I kept copies. Elaine wrote, Rose gave me this letter the week before she died. She said, if Robert ever loses his way, give this to the girls. I think she meant you. You should see it. I tapped the image to enlarge it. It was my grandmother's handwriting, spiky, elegant, undeniable. To my dearest grandchildren. The letter began. I read the first line, and tears pricked my eyes. It wasn't legalese. It wasn't a distribution standard. It was a voice from the grave, cutting through the noise. The seed corn is for everyone. No one is to be left out. No one is to be judged. This money is your freedom, not a reward for obedience. I read on, and then I saw it. The paragraph that changed everything. The paragraph that proved my father wasn't just being cruel. He was violating the express, written moral directive of the woman who gave him the money in the first place. And there was something else attached to the letter, a photocopy of the original trust schedule. I zoomed in. My parents had told everyone the trip cost $50,000. The schedule showed the education fund balance at the time of my grandmother's death was over $200,000. If the account was now consolidated and being drained, where was the rest of it? I looked at the phone. The fear vanished. The sadness vanished. I didn't just have a moral victory. I had a map. I typed back to Elaine. Can I come see you? The kettle is on. She replied. I grabbed my keys. The Harbor Light coordinator was panicking. My parents were about to find out their perfect visual was ruined, and I was on my way to get the weapon that would end the war. I wasn't the daughter anymore. I was the historian, and I was about to correct the record. Elaine Mercer lived in a house that felt like a held breath. It was a Victorian structure on the edge of town, surrounded by overgrown lilacs that tapped against the windows in the afternoon breeze. The interior smelled of lavender, dust, and the heavy, sweet scent of old paper. I sat on a velvet settee that was probably older than the concept of credit cards. Elaine sat opposite me, her hands trembling slightly as she poured tea from a silver pot. She was 82 years old, with eyes that were still sharp, bright blue, and assessing. "I knew you would come," she said, her voice thin but steady. "Eventually, I didn't know there was anything to come for." I said, "Until you texted." Elaine set the teapot down. She reached under the coffee table and pulled out a metal lockbox. It was battered. The gray paint chipped at the corners. She fished a small key from her pocket and opened it. "Your grandmother," Elaine said, "was a woman who understood human nature. She loved your father, but she knew him. She knew his vanity." She pulled out a sheaf of papers and handed them to me. "Read the letter first," she instructed. The paper was cream-colored stationery, heavy and textured. The handwriting was my grandmother Rose's. Sharp, angular loops in blue ink. "My dearest grandchildren, if you are reading this, it means I am gone, and the world has changed. I have left behind a legacy. The seed corn, as I like to call it. It is not a fortune, but it is a foundation. I am writing this to be clear, so that no lawyer or bitterness can twist my intent. The education fund is equal. It is for every grandchild who bears my blood. No exceptions. It is not a reward for good behavior. It is not a prize for the most obedient. It is a birthright. Do not let anyone tell you that you must earn your place at this table. You were born at the table. Love, Grandma Rose." I felt a tear slide down my cheek. I wiped it away quickly. "You were born at the table." She wrote that 2 weeks before the stroke. Elaine said softly. She was worried. Robert, your father, had been talking about consolidating assets. Rose didn't like the sound of it. Elaine handed me the second document. It was a photocopy of a legal instrument titled Summary of Trust Provisions, 1998. "Look at Article 7. Elaine said. I scanned the page. Article 7. Trustee succession and oversight. The trust shall be administered by Robert Butler, serving as primary trustee. However, all distributions exceeding $5,000 must be co-signed and approved by the independent co-trustee, Mr. Samuel Henderson, or his appointed successor from the firm Henderson Associates. Mr. Henderson." I said, "I remember him. He was the one who gave me a silver dollar when I graduated high school. He was the brake." Elaine said, "He was the safety valve. He was there to make sure your father didn't use the college money to buy a boat or impress his friends at the club." "They removed him," I said, the realization hitting me with the force of a physical blow. The document I found at the courthouse, the amendment Mark signed, it removed the requirement for a co-trustee. It gave my father sole discretion. And once the watchdog was gone, Elaine said, taking a sip of tea, the fox was in the henhouse. I looked at the papers in my lap. This wasn't just about a vacation. This wasn't just about my parents being mean or exclusionary. This was theft. They had deliberately altered a legal instrument to remove the oversight my grandmother had explicitly put in place. They had fired the referee so they could break the rules, and they had done it to fund a lifestyle they couldn't actually afford, using the money that was supposed to send their grandchildren to college. "Why didn't you show this to anyone before?" I asked. "Who would I show?" Elaine asked sadly. "Robert wouldn't listen. Mark is terrified of his own shadow. And you were just trying to survive." "Dear, but when I heard about this Hawaii nonsense and how they were treating that sweet boy of yours, I went to the attic. I stood up. I carefully folded the papers and put them in my bag. "Thank you," I said. "You have no idea what this means." "I think I do." Elaine said, "Go give them hell." "Ruby." For Rose. I drove straight to Elias Sterling's office in Linden Harbor. I didn't have an appointment, but the receptionist took one look at my face and buzzed me back. I laid the documents on his desk. The letter from Grandma Rose, the original trust summary, the recent amendment I had pulled from the public records, the timeline of the Hawaii announcements. Mr. Sterling put on his reading glasses. The room was silent for 10 minutes, save for the turning of pages. Finally, he looked up. His expression was grave. "This changes the texture of the case." He said, "This is no longer a dispute about discretionary distribution. This creates a strong presumption of breach of fiduciary duty." "In English?" I asked. "It means they broke the rules to benefit themselves." He said, "Removing a neutral co-trustee shortly before making large, questionable withdrawals for family enrichment that happens to align with a luxury vacation for the trustee? That looks very bad. Ms. Butler, it looks like self-dealing. Can we stop them?" I asked. "We can demand an accounting," he said. "A full, forensic accounting, not just a summary. We want to see every check, every transfer, every credit card payment made from that trust in the last 24 months. If they refuse, we petition the court to compel them. And trust me, they do not want a judge looking at this." "Do it," I said. "Send the demand. It will be an act of war," he warned. "The war started when they told my son he wasn't good enough." I said, "I am just firing back." I left his office and checked my phone. I had a text from Mark. "Can we talk? Please." I agreed to meet him at a park halfway between our offices. It was a neutral ground, populated by joggers and nannies pushing strollers. Mark was sitting on a bench, staring at a duck pond. He looked 10 years older than he had a month ago. I sat down next to him. I didn't speak. I let the silence stretch, heavy and uncomfortable. "I didn't know about the money," he said finally. "I swear to God, Ruby, I didn't know they were draining the fund. You signed the paper that let them do it." I said, "You removed the guardrail." "They told me I had to," he said, his voice cracking. "They sat me down in the study. Dad poured me a scotch. He said they were worried about you." "Worried about me?" "He said you were unstable," Mark said, looking down at his hands. "He said you were having money trouble. He said they were afraid you would try to petition for early access to the trust. Take your share. And then, I don't know, disappear." "Disappear?" I repeated. "To where?" "Mark, I have a lease. I have a job. I have a child in first grade. I have lived in Warren Cove my entire life." "I know," Mark whispered. "But they made it sound so real. They said you were impulsive. They said, 'We need to lock down the trust to protect the principal from Ruby's bad decisions.' They said if I didn't sign, the whole fund could be at risk. So you signed it to protect the money from me." I said, "And instead, you handed it to them to spend on lays and videographers." Mark put his head in his hands. "I was stupid. I just wanted them to stop lecturing me. You know how they are. They twist reality until you don't know which way is up." "I know." I said. I looked at my brother. He wasn't malicious. He was just weak. He had been beaten down by a lifetime of our parents' expectations, their relentless pressure to maintain the image. "Mark," I said gently, "I need you to sit with something. Really sit with it." He looked up. "Think about how easily they lied to you." I said, "They told you I was a thief and a flight risk. They planted that story in your head without a shred of evidence, just to get your signature. They weaponized your fear of conflict to cut me out." Mark looked at the ducks paddling in the water. "They played me," he said. "Yes," I said, "they played all of us. But the game is over." "What are you going to do?" he asked. "I am going to get the truth," I said, "and I need you to stay out of the way. I won't sign anything else." He promised. I told Sarah, "We are sick about this. Being sick doesn't fix it." I said, "But stopping the bleeding helps." I went home. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving behind a cold, hard resolve. But my parents were not going to go quietly. 2 days later, the social retaliation began. It started, as these things often do in Warren Cove, with a whisper network. I ran into Mrs. Gable at the grocery store. She was the woman who had congratulated my mother at the fundraiser. "Oh, Ruby," she said, pausing by the organic bananas. "I heard the news. It is such a shame." "What news?" I asked, bracing myself. "That you aren't letting little Leo go to Hawaii," she said, shaking her head. "Eleanor told me. She said you were so worried about him missing summer school that you put your foot down. It must be hard, being a single mom. Sometimes we have to make the tough choices to prioritize education over fun." I stared at her. It was a masterpiece of a lie. It made me look like a strict, joyless taskmaster, and it made my parents look like the benevolent grandparents who had tried their best but were thwarted by my rigid parenting. Actually, Mrs. Gable, I said, Leo isn't in summer school. He is 6. Oh, she said, blinking. Well, Eleanor said you felt it was best he didn't go. She said you were struggling with the dynamic. That was code for jealous. Later that afternoon, my cousin Mara called me. They are telling everyone you are punishing Leo. Mara said, my mom just called me. She said Aunt Eleanor was crying on the phone, saying you are so jealous of the other grandkids that you're refusing to let Leo participate because you can't go. They excluded me. I said, I know, Mara said, but that is not the story they are selling. The story is that they offered to take Leo, and you said no out of spite. They are painting you as the bitter gatekeeper. It was brilliant. If Leo wasn't there, people would ask questions. By saying I kept him home, they absolved themselves of the cruelty and made me the villain. I hung up. I looked at Leo. He was sitting on the floor, coloring a picture of a shark. He looked up. Mom? Can I go to Mason's house? I hesitated. Mason was Mark's son. Mark was apologetic, but his house was still part of the system. Sure, I said. For an hour, I drove him over. Sarah met me at the door. She looked guilty. I tried to tell them not to talk about it, she whispered. I walked into the living room. Mason and Chloe were there, and Leo ran to join them. We got our snorkel gear, Mason shouted, holding up a bright blue mask. Grandpa bought it. We are going to see the fish. And the volcano, Chloe added. Mommy says we get to drink juice out of coconuts. Leo stood there. He looked at the mask. He looked at his cousins. I like coconuts, Leo said, his voice small. You aren't coming, Mason said matter-of-factly. Grandma said you have to stay home. Mason? Sarah yelled from the kitchen. Leo looked at me. His face crumpled. It wasn't a tantrum. It was a quiet, heartbreaking collapse of hope. I walked over and picked him up. He buried his face in my neck. We are going, I said to Sarah. I carried him to the car. He was crying softly. Why? He asked. Why do I have to stay home? I put him in his car seat. I climbed into the front. I turned around to face him. I could have lied. I could have said, because you have camp. I could have said, because the plane is full. But I respected him too much for that. Leo, I said, listen to me. You are not going on that trip. But it is not because of you. It is not because you are bad. It is not because they don't love you. Then why? He sobbed. Because Grandma and Grandpa are doing a trip that is for show, I said, choosing my words carefully. And we are real. We are messy and loud and real. And sometimes, people who want everything to look perfect don't know what to do with real people. He sniffled. I can be perfect. No, I said fiercely. Don't you ever say that. You are perfect exactly how you are. You do not change for anyone. If they can't see how wonderful you are, that is their loss, not yours. I wiped his tears. And you know what? I said. Since we aren't going to Hawaii, we are going to have our own summer, a yes summer. A yes summer? He asked. Yes, I said. For the next 2 weeks, we are going to do everything we want. We are going to the big aquarium. We are going to the beach with the boardwalk. We are going to eat ice cream for dinner one night. Just us. Ice cream for dinner? He asked, his eyes widening. Mint chocolate chip. I promised, and I meant it. The next 10 days were a blur of defiant joy. I took vacation days I had been hoarding. I drained my small savings account. I didn't care. We went to the aquarium and touched the stingrays. We drove to the coast and built a sandcastle that looked like a fortress. We ate hot dogs and funnel cakes. I took pictures. Not for Instagram, not for a brand, but for us. Photos of Leo laughing with chocolate on his face. Photos of him sleeping in the back seat, exhausted and happy. I created a fortress of happiness around him. I refused to let the shadow of their palm trees fall on our summer. But at night, while he slept, I sharpened my knives. The response from my parents' lawyer arrived on a Tuesday. It was a heavy envelope. Mr. Sterling had forwarded it to me with a note. Review carefully. This is their first offer. I opened it. It was the accounting I had demanded. Or rather, it was a version of an accounting. It was a spreadsheet. But it was vague. It listed transfers out of the trust in round numbers. January 15th. Administrative reimbursement. $5,000. February 10th. Legal retainer. $3,000. March 5th. Family enrichment expense. $25,000. April 12th. Cultural education deposit. $30,000. I stared at the numbers. Family enrichment. Cultural education. I opened my laptop. I pulled up the timeline I had created. March 5th was the week my mother had texted the group chat about the trip. April 12th was the deadline for final deposits at the Royal Sands. I Googled Royal Sands Hawaii deposit policy. 50% due at booking. Balance due 60 days prior. I did the math. The numbers lined up almost to the penny. They were calling it cultural education. They were categorizing a $50,000 luxury vacation as an educational expense to justify taking it from the trust. And there was another line item. May 20th. Harbor Light sponsorship grant. $5,000. They were paying Harbor Light to sponsor the trip using the trust money. They were essentially taking money from the left pocket, putting it in the right pocket, and calling it charity. It was money laundering. A simplified, suburban version of it, but laundering nonetheless. They were washing the trust money through the family enrichment category to pay for their vanity. I called Mr. Sterling. I have the accounting. I said, "It is a joke. They are banking on you not knowing the difference," Sterling said. "They are calling it enrichment. The trust gives them discretion for that. Grandma's letter says equal for every grandchild." I said, "If they spend 50 grand on 4 grandkids and 0 on the 5th, that is not discretion. That is discrimination." "Agreed," Sterling said. "But we need to prove the money went to the travel agency. This spreadsheet is just a summary. We need the canceled checks. I can get them." I said, "Or at least, I can prove where the money went." "How?" "Because I know the timeline," I said, "and I know where they are going." I hung up. I looked at the date. The trip was next week. And then I saw it. I was scrolling through the Harbor Light Community Circle's Facebook page. Looking for any mention of the sponsorship, I found a post from 2 days ago. "Join us for the annual Harbor Light Gala, next Saturday night at the Warren Cove Yacht Club. A night of elegance and community. Highlight of the evening. A live satellite broadcast aloha from our leadership family, the Butlers, sharing a special message about generational values from the shores of Hawaii." I froze. A live broadcast. They weren't just filming segments. They were doing a live stream. During the gala. I looked at the date. Next Saturday, the gala was here, in Warren Cove. My parents would be in Hawaii, beaming in on a giant screen. But the audience, the donors, the Heritage Council members, the people my parents were so desperate to impress, would be right here, in the Yacht Club ballroom. And I was in Warren Cove. I didn't need to fly to Hawaii to confront them. I didn't need to scream at them on a beach. I just needed to be in that ballroom when the camera went live. I picked up my phone and called Mara. "Mara," I said, "does your firm have tickets to the Harbor Light Gala?" "Yeah," Mara said. "We bought a table." "Why?" "I need a seat." I said, "Ruby," Mara warned, "that is the Lion's Den. Everyone will be there. The council, the mayor." "I know." I said, "That is exactly why I need to be there. What are you going to do?" "I am going to watch the show," I said, "and maybe I will ask a question." "You are going to blow it up," Mara whispered. "Aren't you?" "They blew it up when they stole my son's future." I said, "I am just clearing the rubble." "Wear the red dress," Mara said. "I'll put you on the list." I hung up. I looked at the accounting spreadsheet one last time. Family enrichment. I was about to give them an education they would never forget. The night of the Harbor Light Gala arrived on a wave of humid, salt-heavy air. The Warren Cove Yacht Club was lit up like a cruise ship, its windows glowing gold against the dark water of the marina. Valets in white jackets were parking Teslas and Range Rovers, and the sound of a jazz quartet drifted out into the parking lot. I sat in my car for a moment, watching the arrivals. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. I had followed Mara's advice. I was wearing a red dress. It was simple, tailored, and the color of a warning sign. I had pulled my hair back. I wore no jewelry. I didn't need it. In my hand, I held a manila envelope. It contained 3 things: the letter from Grandma Rose, the original trust summary, and the letter of demand Elias Sterling had drafted that morning. I wasn't here to scream. I wasn't here to throw wine. I was here to be a witness. I stepped out of the car. The gravel crunched under my heels. My heart was beating a slow, steady rhythm against my ribs. Breathe in, breathe out. Mara met me at the entrance. She looked nervous, clutching her clutch bag as if it contained a live grenade. "You came," she whispered. "I have a ticket." I said, "Table 12. "Ruby," she said, scanning the room over my shoulder. "They have security. If you make a scene—" "I am not going to make a scene," I said calmly. "I am just going to watch the movie." We walked in. The ballroom was transformed. Tables were draped in navy linen, centered with massive arrangements of white hydrangeas and driftwood. The air smelled of expensive perfume and scallops. I saw my brother, Mark, sitting at a table near the front. He was staring at his phone, ignoring Sarah, who was nervously shredding a cocktail napkin. He looked up as I entered. His eyes widened when he saw the red dress. He gave me a tiny, imperceptible nod. It wasn't permission, exactly, but it was acknowledgement. He knew I was there. He knew what I carried. I found my seat at Mara's table, near the back, but with a clear view of the stage. A massive projection screen had been set up behind the podium, currently displaying the Harbor Light logo. The room filled up. The lights dimmed. The president of the Heritage Council, a man named Mr. Abernathy, who wore a bow tie and an expression of permanent judgment, took the stage. "Welcome, friends and neighbors," he boomed. "Tonight is a celebration of what makes Warren Cove special: community, leadership, and above all, family." Applause rippled through the room. I sat with my hands folded in my lap. "We have a special treat tonight, Mr. Abernathy continued. "Two of our most dedicated patrons, Robert and Eleanor Butler, could not be with us in person. Why? Because they are living the very values we celebrate. They are currently in Hawaii, treating their entire family to a journey of cultural enrichment and bonding." A murmur of approval went through the crowd. "So generous," a woman at my table whispered. "They really do everything for those kids. But thanks to technology—" "Mr. Abernathy said, gesturing to the screen. "They are joining us live to share a special message. Ladies and gentlemen, the Butler family." The screen flickered. Static hissed for a second, and then the image resolved. It was perfect. Too perfect. The background was a sunset over the Pacific Ocean, painting the sky in violent shades of violet and orange. Palm trees framed the shot. Standing on a pristine stretch of white sand were my parents. They looked tanned, radiant, and rich. My father was wearing a white linen suit. My mother was in a flowing gold caftan, and arranged around them, like props in a catalog shoot, were the grandchildren, Mark's 2 daughters, Bethany's 2 children. They were all wearing matching outfits, white shorts and gold shirts. They were smiling, holding leis. There were 4 children. The visual impact of it hit me harder than I expected. It was an erasure, a public, broadcasted lie. To the 300 people in this room, the Butler family was complete. My sons simply did not exist. "Aloha! Warren Cove!" my father bellowed, waving at the camera. The audio was slightly delayed, creating an eerie echo. "Aloha!" The crowd in the ballroom responded, laughing. "We miss you all," my mother said, stepping closer to the camera. She put her hand on Mason's shoulder. "But we are having a magical time connecting with our heritage and with each other. That is wonderful." "Eleanor," Mr. Abernathy said into his microphone, "you truly are setting the standard for grandparent leadership. Tell us, what has been the highlight of the trip so far?" "Oh, just seeing the cousins together. my mother gushed, seeing the bond between them. You know, we believe that the greatest legacy we can leave is love. We wanted to bring all the grandkids here to show them that they are part of something bigger than themselves. I stood up. I didn't rush. I didn't knock over my chair. I just stood up. The room was dark, but the red dress caught the light from the stage. I walked toward the center aisle, where a standing microphone had been placed for the QA session scheduled for later. Mara reached out to grab my hand, but I was already moving. On the screen, my mother was still talking. "Every grandchild is a blessing," she said. "Every single one is a jewel in the family crown. That is why we did this, to honor every one of them." I reached the microphone. I didn't wait for her to finish. I didn't wait for permission. "If every grandchild matters," I said, my voice clear and steady, amplified by the speakers, "why did you exclude mine?" The silence that fell over the ballroom was instant and absolute. It sucked the air out of the room. On the screen. My parents didn't hear it immediately due to the delay. My mother kept smiling for 2 seconds. Then she paused, touching her earpiece. "I'm sorry," she said, her smile faltering. "Did someone say something?" In the ballroom, 300 heads turned to look at me. "Mr. Abernathy looked paralyzed on stage. I repeated, looking directly at the giant screen. "If every grandchild is a blessing, why is there one missing from your picture? Why is my son, Leo, sitting at home in Warren Cove while you tell these people you took all the grandkids?" My father stepped forward on the screen. His face darkened. He squinted at the camera. "Ruby, is that you?" "Yes." "Dad," I said, "it is me, and I'm confused. You just told 300 donors that you are honoring every grandchild, but you left a 6-year-old boy behind, and you paid for that exclusion with money that was supposed to be for his education." A gasp rippled through the room. The word money changed the temperature instantly. This was no longer a family spat. It was a financial allegation. "Ruby, you are being hysterical," my father snapped, forgetting the audience. "Forgetting the perfect grandfather role. This is not the place. We discussed this. You chose to keep him home. That is a lie." I said, I didn't raise my voice. I let the word hang there. "I have the emails. Dad, I have the text messages where you said he hadn't earned it. I have the letter where you tried to bargain his dignity for a future invite. I held up the manila envelope, and I have the accounting records." I said, "I have the proof that you transferred $58,000 from the Butler Family Educational Trust, a trust established by Grandma Rose for all 5 grandchildren, to pay for your vow renewal and this media event, on stage." A woman stood up. I recognized her. It was Cynthia, the Harbor Light board member I had seen in the emails. She looked pale. "Excuse me," Cynthia said, her voice trembling slightly. "Ms. Butler, are you suggesting that the sponsorship funds were commingled with a family trust?" I turned to her. "I am suggesting that you check your liability insurance. Cynthia, because you are currently live streaming a commercial for your organization featuring minors whose legal guardian did not consent to their participation." The screen behind Mr. Abernathy seemed to vibrate with tension. "Ruby!" my mother shrieked. Her composure shattered. The kindly grandmother mask dissolved, revealing the terrified, controlling woman underneath. "Stop this. You are ruining everything. You are just jealous because you weren't invited." "I am not jealous." I said, "I am a mother protecting her son." "You are unstable," my father shouted. The audio distorted, making him sound monstrous. "Ladies and gentlemen, please forgive my daughter. She has had a hard time since her divorce. She doesn't understand the complexities of—" "I understand perfectly." I cut in. "I understand that you altered the trust 6 weeks ago to remove the independent co-trustee so you could approve your own spending. I understand that you labeled a luxury vacation as cultural education to bypass the restrictions." I walked to the edge of the stage and placed the envelope on the table in front of Cynthia. "Here's the demand for an immediate forensic accounting," I said, "and here's the letter from Grandma Rose stating that the fund is equal for everyone, no exceptions. Mr. Abernathy was waving his hands at the tech booth. "Cut the feed! Cut the feed!" But the tech crew was too stunned to move. On the screen, my father was purple with rage. "You ungrateful! After everything we have done for you, we are the only reason you have any standing in this town." "No," a voice said from the front table. It was Mark. My brother stood up. He looked at the screen, at the parents who had bullied him into silence for 30 years. Then he looked at me. He looked at the crowd. "She isn't unstable," Mark said. His voice cracked. But he pushed through. "She isn't lying. They told me she agreed to the changes. They told me she wanted them to manage the money." He took a deep breath. "She didn't." Mark said, "She never agreed. They lied to me to get my signature, and they left Leo behind because they thought he wouldn't look good in the picture." That was the nail in the coffin. When the golden boy, the compliant son, the witness to the trust, stood up and confirmed the fraud, the narrative didn't just break, it evaporated. The room erupted. People were standing up, whispering, pointing. Cynthia was frantically reading the documents I had handed her. On the screen, my mother was sobbing. My father was yelling at someone off camera to fix the damn phone. "Cut it, mister!" Abernathy screamed. The screen went black. The silence that followed was different. It wasn't the silence of shock. It was the silence of judgment. I didn't stay to watch the fallout. I didn't need to hear the whispers of the Heritage Council members realizing they had almost elected an embezzler. I didn't need to see Cynthia calling the legal department. I turned around and walked out. I walked down the center aisle, the red dress swishing around my legs. I held my head high. I felt the gaze of the entire town on my back. But for the first time in my life, I didn't feel small. I felt enormous. I walked out the double doors, past the valet stand, and into the cool night air. I got into my car. My hands were steady. My phone buzzed. I looked at it. A text from my father. "You ungrateful little witch. You have destroyed us. You just ended this family." I stared at the words. "You just ended this family." He was wrong. I hadn't ended the family. I had ended the lie. I had ended the silence. I had ended the cycle of paying for their love with my son's self-worth. I didn't reply. I didn't block him. I just deleted the thread. I started the car and drove home. When I got to the apartment, the babysitter was watching TV on the couch. "Is everything okay?" she asked, looking at my face. "You're home early. Everything is fine." I said, "Everything is finally fine." I paid her and sent her home. I walked into Leo's room. It was dark, illuminated only by the glow of his turtle nightlight. He was asleep, one arm thrown over his head, the stuffed stingray tucked under his chin. I sat on the edge of the bed. I watched him breathe. He wouldn't have a trust fund paid for by a lie. He wouldn't have grandparents who treated him like a prop. But he would have a mother who fought for him. He would have the truth, and he would have the money that was rightfully his. Because Mr. Sterling was going to tear that trust apart piece by piece until every cent was returned. I brushed a piece of hair off his forehead. "We are the shark team," I whispered. He stirred in his sleep, sighing contentedly. I walked to the window and looked out at the parking lot, far away. I could imagine the chaos in Warren Cove, the legal battles that were coming, the social shunning. My parents were stranded on an island, both literally and metaphorically, with nothing but their matching outfits and their exposed greed. Let them have their sunset. I had the dawn. I went to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and for the first time in years, I drank it without a lump in my throat. The story was over. My life was just beginning. Thank you so much for listening to My Parents Announced They're Taking All the Grandkids to Hawaii, except mine. This story was a journey into the heart of family betrayal and the quiet power of standing up for the truth. I would love to know where you are listening from today. Please leave a comment below and tell me which part of Ruby's revenge felt the most satisfying to you. Was it the yes summer, or was it that final moment with the microphone? If you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to Revenge Stories and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new drama. Share your thoughts in English in the comments. I read every single one. Until next time, remember, sometimes the best revenge is simply telling the truth.